We got our first look at the Nintendo Switch over 4 years ago now, and with the latest rumors predicting an upgraded Switch model coming in the first half of 2021, I thought it would be a good time to go through some of my hopes for whatever this next version of the Switch ends up being. Now, it seems all but certain at this point that this new Switch will be more of a mid-cycle hardware refresh, similar to the new Nintendo 3DS, rather than a proper Switch successor, but I certainly hope Nintendo sticks with the same overall form and function of the current Switch whenever they decide to release the true follow-up to their wildly popular hybrid console. So I think some of these things probably won't happen until we get that proper Switch successor, but I'm going to kind of lump these all into one, hoping that Nintendo sticks with the Switch as their flagship console line for the foreseeable future, similar to Xbox and PlayStation. I'm also going to try to keep this list pretty realistic, obviously something like, I hope it's twice as powerful as the PS5 and has 100 hours battery life, won't be happening anytime soon. And real quick, if you're new here and you like this mix of Nintendo news and hardware and accessory reviews, make sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on everything happening with the channel. With all that out of the way, let's start off with number 1. Better build quality. Now, for me, the Switch doesn't quite live up to the builds of some of Nintendo's previous systems. It just doesn't feel quite as solid or indestructible. I mean, I guess the Wii U gamepad was pretty creaky, but I've also never been a huge fan of the slightly rubberized matte finish that's on the outside of the Switch. It's extremely delicate and really susceptible to scratches or scuffs, or even just over time, it can kind of rub off and leave shiny spots where your sweaty little hands come into contact with it the most. And even though I imagine tabletop mode is probably the playstyle that players use the least, it would be really nice to get a higher quality kickstand. Of course, I also have to mention Joy-Con drift. Even though I've only experienced it with 1 or 2 of the Joy-Con out of the many that I own, it's obviously a widespread issue, and I really hope that Nintendo either uses better quality parts for the thumbsticks on the next iteration of Joy-Con, or addresses the issue in some other way. Joy-Con are expensive little controllers, and for the price, they should be more reliable. Number 2, more apps. Now, this one isn't necessarily a huge deal for me, but with the popularity of the Switch, it is kind of perplexing that we still don't have things like Netflix or a web browser on the platform. Sure, I can access all those things from my phone, but being able to look something up online while playing a game would be a nice convenience, and things like Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, or Spotify would be nice additions too. Number 3, more storage. Again, this isn't the biggest deal for me, as this is something that can be addressed with a high capacity SD card, and those are only becoming less and less expensive. Luckily, I've got a 400 gigabyte card, and I go physical pretty much whenever possible, so I still have some room left. But only having 32 gigabytes of internal storage baked into the Switch is something that's going to fill up really fast, especially if you buy mostly digital titles. Number 4, Bluetooth support. This is something I hope is addressed as soon as possible, because it really does feel like stepping back in time to have to use a pair of wired headphones with the Switch or a clunky Bluetooth adapter. I do realize that there may have been some concern with the Bluetooth signal interfering with the Joy-Con when they're detached, but in 2021, I'm confident Nintendo can figure this one out. Number 5, a headphone jack and analog triggers for the Pro Controller. Now, I love the Pro Controller. It's super comfortable, it has an amazing battery life, but the lack of a headphone jack is really unfortunate, since that seems like something that should just be standard at this point. And analog triggers would also be really nice, especially for FPS or racing games. Even the developers of Grid Autosport patched in GameCube controller support, which allows you to feather the throttle, and that's something that's almost necessary for some of the drift courses. So when I'm sitting there with a USB adapter for my wired GameCube controller from 2001, and that's somehow giving me a better control experience, something is wrong. Number 6, a better screen. Now, the Switch screen still looks pretty good, and the higher pixel density of the smaller Switch Lite screen looks even better. It was a massive improvement over the 3DS or the Wii U gamepad, but at this point, I think we're ready for a 1080p display, since the current one tops out at 720p. I'd also love it if we got a glass screen rather than the very easily scratched plastic. So maybe Nintendo considers going with an OLED display, or maybe we finally see the rumored IGZO display from Sharp that was supposedly going to be included in the V2 better battery life Switch, or then maybe the Switch Lite, but then neither of those ended up being the case. Number 7, better specs. This is an obvious one, and again, I imagine some of these wishes won't come true until we see a proper Switch successor, but with rumors of the upgraded 2021 model being 4K capable, who knows? Now, the current Switch has 4 gigabytes of RAM, half of the base PS4's RAM, and apparently during the Switch's development, Capcom needed to convince Nintendo that they needed to go with at least 4 gigabytes, as they were apparently considering going with less than that. Thank you, Capcom. Now, when you consider the 16 gigabytes of RAM included in the upcoming PS5 and Xbox Series X, it's clear how quickly the Switch will start falling behind. Now, I would never expect the Switch to approach the power of those consoles in a handheld form factor, but bringing the RAM up to 8 gigabytes could potentially allow for somewhat competent ports of next-gen titles, although surely running at lower resolutions and frame rates. Then there have been the rumors that the next Switch could take advantage of NVIDIA's DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling, which is essentially AI-driven upscaling that's been shown to be incredibly power efficient in improving resolution while maintaining frame rate. Maybe we don't see native 4K output, but this could allow for some impressive 4K upscaling, and this all depends on what NVIDIA Tegra chip we see utilized in that next Switch. Number 8, more personality. This can kind of piggyback off of my last point. When you look at the Switch OS versus the 3DS, it's pretty bland. We still only have white and black themes to choose from, no custom backgrounds, and no menu music. But what the Switch UI lacks in personality, it certainly makes up for in speed. And this is no mistake on Nintendo's part. Both the Wii U and the 3DS were pretty sluggish when moving between applications, and the snappiness of the Switch really lends itself to the hybrid's pick up and play nature. I do think though, with a faster processor and more RAM, the Switch could maintain its relatively quick load times while adding a bit more personality too. I noticed a while back there was an update to the Switch version of Stardew Valley which was intended to improve the game's initial load time, which had been pretty sluggish up until that point, and the main change that I noticed from the update was that the music that played in the background while the game was loading was cut out, and I think that's the exact reason we don't have Nintendo's usually stellar menu music with the current version of the Switch. Number 9, better friends list management, and this is a big one. Through my Instagram page, I've built up a pretty large friend list on my Switch, and forget about having to deal with the ridiculously obnoxious friend codes. My biggest complaint is that I can't really do much of anything with that list other than see what games my friends are playing and their playtime totals. Sure, I can use the Nintendo Switch Online app to invite my friends to play certain games or use it for voice chat, but it's so woefully outdated and unnecessarily complicated, and I think we're long overdue for Nintendo to give us a better way to communicate with our gaming friends. I'd also love it if they brought back something similar to the 3DS's Street Pass feature. It really incentivized bringing the system with you everywhere you went, and there was nothing quite like seeing that little green light light up when you had passed by another 3DS owner out in the wild. Number 10, a surprise. As I said in the beginning, I really hope that Nintendo bucks their recent trend of reinventing their flagship console with each generation and really goes back to what they did with the Super Nintendo, just improve on a winning concept. That being said, I would still like to see a little bit of that unexpected Nintendo magic when it comes to the next Switch, some feature that no one saw coming that really adds to the play experience in an exciting way. Nintendo are the kings of creativity, and even though they don't always nail it with their hardware, there's nothing else quite like it when they do. Okay, I think that does it for my list of hopes and dreams for the next Switch. I love my Switch. I think it might even be my favorite Nintendo console ever, but there's certainly room for improvement. So let me know down below if there's anything I missed that you'd like to see included in the next Switch. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like on your way out. And until next week, have a great day, play some video games, and I'll see you next time.